Nationally, black students are suspended 3 times as often as their white peers. Green, New York Times, 2018. Discipline data from an urban high school showed that black students were especially likely to be referred to the Office for Discipline on the basis of defiant behavior, a relatively subjective category of misbehavior in comparison. Riddle and Sinclair, 2019. So many times when you see these kids that are called thugs who are loud and rude, that really it is a defense mechanism and that they're afraid. You see African American, males in particular, but females also, walking through a neighborhood displaying a kind of bravado. What people don't understand is that's a culture, that's a methodology, that's a way of walking through the world to protect you in an environment that is very, very violent, and you have to send signals to make sure you're not victimized. Gail King with Tanahashi Coates, CBS This Morning, 2015. All right, welcome to our PD for today. We're talking about improving classroom management and school culture through culturally responsive teaching and student self-awareness and decision making. Today's part 1, expectations and outcomes to eliminate perceived bias in the classroom. All right, so a few observations about our school. Give me a head nod if you have observed these things as well. First off, behavior is the biggest obstacle for academic success in our school. Students who demonstrate the most disruptive behavior are a small percentage of the student body, but their behavior disrupts the learning of the large percentage of students who want to learn, or who could be inspired to want to learn given the right learning environment. Though they greatly outnumber the disruptive students, the academically inclined students are afraid to apply peer pressure on the disruptive students because of the fear of negative consequences. Students who are disruptive do not see academic success as a priority. And finally, students who are disruptive often perceive that they are being treated unfairly academically and from a disciplinary perspective. All right, so our goals for today's PD to help address some of these are we're going to examine the discipline data from last year to look at what was going on with our discipline procedures. We're also going to examine our own past interactions with students. We're going to identify points at which another decision would have been made a difference in the outcome of a situation with a student. And we're also going to learn about some strategies that you could implement in your classroom tomorrow to take a step forward in minimizing the behavior disruptions and creating a more equitable learning environment. All right, let's get started. All right, let's start by looking at the data. All right, as you saw in our quotes earlier on about the demographics and the frequency of suspensions for black students, we see the same data kind of represented here in our own school. All right, for example, at our school, 82.87% of our student population is African American. All right, with the next largest group being the Caucasian students, who are 10.65% of the population. All right, and so very one-sided in terms of our demographics at our school. All right. Looking at suspensions by subgroup, we see that of all the suspensions in our school, and last year we had 499 suspensions. All right, and now some of those were one-timers, some of them were frequent flyers, but the quantity of suspensions equates to approximately 57.8% of our student population being suspended at one time or another. All right. Broken down by subgroup, we see that 53.8% of those suspended were of the black subgroup, while 1.9% were multiracial, 1.4% were white, and 0.7% were Hispanic. Now, given that the predominant subgroup in our student population is the African American subgroup, it makes sense that they would have the highest suspension rate. So if we take this a little bit further and look at just the suspension rate within each subgroup, we see a little bit different picture here. All right. If you notice here on this one, we'll see that 57.8% of the student population was suspended, with 53.8% of the black population being suspended total. All right, but within their own subgroup, all right, again, the black students that were suspended, that's 53.8% of the total population, but it is 64.9% of the total black population in the school. So of that particular group, 64.9% of them were suspended at one time or another. All right, so it's much higher in their own individual group. If you compare that to the other demographic subgroups here, you can see that the white subgroup, 13% of their subgroup was suspended at one time or another. All right, and which is only 1.4% of the overall population, but again, 13% within their individual subgroup. All right. We also see the Hispanic subgroup that of their suspension rate, it only equated to about 0.7% of the total school population, but it was 16.2% of their subgroup. All right, which those numbers are incredibly low compared to the fact that of the black student subgroup, 64% of that particular group were suspended. Right? And that begs the question as to what's going on with that particular subgroup. How are they being addressed and treated in within our school that is different than some of these other subgroups with lower rates? All right, and so we're going to take a look at that. All right. We want to also take a look at some of the violations that were on those referrals. All right. There's a myriad of violations. Here we see the ones that were the most common. All right. The violation that was, or the rules violation that was cited the most is called rules violation. It's kind of a catch-all violation for things like disrespect, insubordination, cursing in the classroom, just behavior that generally could have been managed in the classroom but got out of hand and escalated, and the only recourse was to have the student removed via referral. All right, so you see that catch-all was cited 47.3% of all referrals given to the entire student population. 47.3% was rules violation. All right, these basic things that escalated and got out of hand and resulted in the student being removed. All right. Looking at the overall, we see that again, while 47% of all referrals cited rules violation as the cause for the referral, looking at the percent of black students within their own subgroup that received that same violation, it was 53.1% of all of the referrals for black students were rules violations. All right, and within the overall student population, 44%. Okay, so again, really high numbers for the black student population, especially in this category of rules violation. All right, again, the second highest category of things cited was only 6.7%. All right, while rules violation was much, much higher. So again, these are things that are smaller things that escalate and result in a major disruption and a need to have the student removed from the classroom because it's completely taken away from the learning environment. All right, and so what I want you to think about here is to take a minute. We're going to pause. We're going to think, pair, share with a person next to us here. All right. Now you've got the handout of the data that we just showed. All right. So I want you to take a look at it with your partner. All right. Think about some incidents of which you have experienced, seen, or heard that would be categorized as a rules violation or referral. Again, things like insubordination. Maybe it was walking out of class for some disagreement. Maybe it was using profanity. Any of those smaller things that escalated out of hand and resulted in a referral. All right. I want you to think about those. Each of you come up with one, and then we're going to share that. You're going to discuss that with your partner. All right. And then once you discuss those incidences that you know about, I want you to also think about those situations and discuss together. All right. Discuss together. Were there any points in that situation where it could have been de-escalated? Could something have been done, or could it have been handled differently to de-escalate the situation so that it did not get to a point where a referral was required? Okay. And the third thing I want you to do during this time is to think about some possible strategies that could have been implemented preemptively that would have prevented this situation. All right. Take a few minutes, discuss those things, and then we'll share them out in just a few. glad you've had a chance to share and share out. We have heard some great ideas and some great thoughts on that one. All right. Again, one of the best things we can do as teachers is to reflect upon our actions. We do this a lot with our lessons. We reflect on our lessons. How did they go? We make changes and improvements for the next time we teach that lesson. The same thing can happen with our own interactions behaviorally. You know, look at a situation. What did we do in that situation? How did we handle it? And how could we have handled it better to have a different outcome? All right. Those are some things that are hard to kind of know in the moment. But when we reflect on these situations, we can definitely create a bag of resources for ourselves on how to handle situations differently to help de-escalate them in the future. Because again, our goal is to not kick kids out of the classroom. We want them in the classroom, engaged and learning. And so we want to make sure we have some strategies to de-escalate these situations so that they don't get out of hand and result in referrals. All right. Again, I want to go back to that third quote that we saw at the very beginning. This is a quote by Tanahashi Coates that he discussed in his interview with CBS this morning as he was being interviewed about the book Between the World and Me. All right. The Gail King, one of the anchors, had said after reading the book that she commented that so many times when you see these kids that are called thugs who are loud and rude, that really it is a defense mechanism and that they're afraid. And she was kind of paraphrasing something that Ta-Nehisi Coates has said. And he went on to explain that in the book. He talked about how that behavior, that rudeness, that loudness, that's a type of bravado. It's a show. All right, because as a culture, the African American culture has often been treated very poorly in American society, and that display, that loudness, that rudeness, that very showy reputation kind of show off. It's a defense mechanism. It's part of the cult. It's part of a cultural defense mechanism to send signals to make sure that you're not victimized, or make sure that the student is not victimized in any way, whatever that might be. And sometimes as I mentioned, the observations that students can be perceived of being victimized by unfair treatment at school, whether it's academically, oh, I did the work, why did I get an F? Or behaviorally, oh, you're just picking on me because you don't like me, or because I'm black, or whatever it might be. And these are perceptions that students have when they feel as though they're being unfairly treated. All right, and we want to make sure. And one of our goals today, is to really figure out how can we structure our environment. How can we set up our classroom environment to eliminate the perceptions that students might have that they're being treated unfairly, so that we can meet them in a place to help them move past those frustrations that they're having and de-escalate those behavior distractions, and really show them that we're there to support them and want to help them succeed academically. All right. And so again, we've already hit a couple of our objectives. We looked at the data. We examined some of the situations that we have seen that have led to referrals that we've experienced. We've talked about some ideas of how we can maybe de-escalate those things in the future. And now we're talking about some strategies here. Just a few things you could do starting tomorrow even to help set your classroom up to be more to eliminate those perceived bias and to be more fair, and to even put some of the ownership of behavior back on the student. Okay, so we're going to take a look at that today. All right, so what do we do about all of this situation? All right. All right. So first off, we need to have clear expectations and outcomes. All right. And some of you may be familiar with some of these things we're going to mention today. I know that I've used them extensively, and there's a lot of research out there that really supports them. But the first thing is setting clear expectations in the classroom. If students don't know how to behave in the classroom, they don't know your expectations clearly, then they're going to behave in what manner they believe is the right expectation. And when that doesn't align with your expectations, they get frustrated because they were behaving in a way that they thought was acceptable, and then now they're being punished for it. All right, and that leads to that unfair treatment. All right. So one of the things is that the CHAMPS model. It's a methodology for behavior management. It's research based, and it's been used in classrooms for a number of years. I've used it for a number of years as well, and it's very effective to really just establishing with students what the expectations are. I usually have these on posters in the front of my room so that I review them periodically. But then as I start each portion of my lesson, so as the students walk in, all right, guys, we're doing the bell work today. You know, our bell work CHAMPS model shows that we are not talking during the bell work, and that if you need help, you just raise your hand. Your activity is on the board today, and as soon as your timer's up, we'll discuss it. All right. Today we're going into the whole group. All right, now we're going to the whole group lesson. So again, for our expectation for the communication is that we're silent during this portion, and that you raise your hand if you have a question. Here's what you need to be doing, taking notes or whatever it might be. All right, guys, small group. All right, and so Champs really puts visually up front for kids to see what is the expectation that you have of them in each of the activities that they're going to go through in their class, in your classroom today. All right, and then obviously we want to make sure that our kids need a lot of incentives. A lot of times they struggle with long-term gratification, and they need that short-term gratification. They want to be able to be recognized for doing the right thing. They want to be recognized positively. All right. A lot of times they're recognized negatively, but if they can be recognized positively and see some benefits to that and see how that's going to help them, they can really capitalize on that, and it really helps with their behavior. All right, and so one of the things we might do that is some behavior tracking. I know I use Class Dojo for behavior tracking, and I have a whole system of incentives that I have really found to be a big turnaround for kids in participation and engagement. All right, so we'll look at that as a thing. So we want to have clear expectations with something like a champs. And we want to have an incentive system, a behavior tracking system, and an incentive system through something like a Class Dojo. All right, and we also want to have the kids will from time to time not meet those expectations, and we want to have a clear tiered system of what's going to happen for that, so they have a clear ability to make a decision on what they're going to do. Like, all right, here's my behavior that I'm considering, right? If I do this, I can clearly see what the consequence is going to be of that. What's the outcome of my behavior going to be? All right, either the first time, second, or third time. So having clear expectations and outcomes is also very important, so kids can make those decisions. All right. And so let's take a bit closer look at CHAMPS here. All right. As I mentioned before, CHAMPS stands for conversation, help, activity, movement, participation, and usually the S is something that individual people add in. This person has in success. It could be some sort of previous club is that we had a Strive 65, which was a separate program of character traits, and we put in one of the strives as the S. All right, but the S is usually added on as some kind of success marker for students. All right, but like I mentioned here earlier, we see you've got the warm-up category. All right, and these are all interchangeable. This is very customizable. But if let's say you're doing the warm-up or the bell work, right? You could have either low voices or no voices for the conversation. Right? Help. You could put in ask a friend or a teacher or whatever it might be. Right? The activity, what they should be doing in that warm-up, the bell ringer or whatever it is, if it's a thing that requires their engagement. What's their movement level? Limited movement or none. What's their participation? All right, it could be independently, like this one work independently. It could be, raise your hand and share out the answer when you have it, whatever it might be. All right, then you see the whole group portion, teacher instruction, right? Silence or that. I've seen a lot of folks use for conversation. They have like numbers for the level, like a 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's what I use. In my champs models, I have the numbers for the conversation. This one has low voices, silence, or low voices with group or silence or absolute silence. So they qualify that, but I found the numbers very effective for kids too. All right, but you see things like for help, raise your hand. You see things for activities like note taking or class discussion. Work is directed as participation, right? We see the activities for group activity or independent work or even test or quiz. So you really want to have a champs model for each activity that you would do in your classroom. This one here you see is you can do it as one big chart like this one. I have individual posters for each of mine so that I can have it spread out, in the room and be more colorful and exciting and more engaging for kids. However you want to do it though, Champs is very customizable, but it's a great way to really put the expectation for each activity that kids are going to engage in on the board, on the wall, somewhere where they can permanently reference it, and that you too, like, all right guys, now we finished our warm-up, now we're going to go into our group activity today. As a reminder, in a group activity, you have low voices for your conversation. If you need help, you ask your partner or the teacher. Your activity today is you're going to be doing a think, pair, share. When you're for the movement today, you're only going to move when directed. You'll think, pair, share with one group, then we'll move to another group, and you'll do it there as well. Make sure that you're working as a team, and then if you do all those things, you're going to have great success today. All right. So reviewing those expectations at the start of each activity, yes, it does take a little bit of time. all right, especially when you're first implementing champs. But kids get the routine down, and it really can make a strong difference in your classroom environment if kids clearly know what you expect in each activity, and they can reference that to follow it. Okay, and it also too it gives you a clear marker of, hey, Johnny, we're in the group activity, and right now I have you guys sitting. I haven't directed you to move yet, so please make sure you stay in your seat, right? It's very clear. It's not like you're picking on Johnny. You're just referring him back to the expectation and ensuring that he is following that. All right. So it eliminates that a little bit of bias in that respect. All right. And again, CHAMPS is research based, and there's even been some studies on its effectiveness. All right. We see here a quote from a doctoral study by doctoral candidate Vanessa Evans from 2016, where she says that CHAMPS practices had a positive effect on decreasing problem behavior in all the participant teachers' classrooms. Right? She looked at teachers who were both new teachers and veteran teachers. She looked at classrooms of all grade levels, and she examined the effectiveness of CHAMPS from not being implemented to being implemented and what it did for this classroom environment. She goes on to say that teachers in the program evaluation indicated less disruptive behavior in the classroom. They all communicated a positive effect that significantly impacted the classroom environment. Thus, it can be surmised that teachers who use CHAMPS can expect to experience improvements in student behavior and improvements that establish the context for effective instructional practices. And again, she didn't mention in these classrooms if there was any incentives behind that, other than here's the expectation. But again, having incentives for that expectation really can help motivate kids to buy into it. Okay. And so, CHAMPS is definitely a great way to help establish what the expectations are so kids know exactly how they can operate and behave in class to be successful, right? Because ultimately, kids do want to be successful. They really do. They may come in with this bravado, with this attitude, but when it comes down to it, when they're not on stage, when they're not in front of the class, they do want to feel successful. And it's just that they have not felt successful at all in school so far, and so, or in your subject area, or whatever it might be, or with teachers of your gender or ethnicity. And so, really showing them a pathway to be successful can really help turn that around for them. All right. Again, when you set expectations, there's also going to be students who don't always meet those expectations. And so that's when we usually have some kind of class rules. Now, champs really can be your class rules. They can be, you can incorporate a champs your champs expectations and use those as class rules, so you don't have to have a separate system of rules. All right. But some of us do like to have still some rules on the wall, and if you do, one of the things that really can really help your kids is to really put a positive spin on it. All right. Usually rules focus on don't do format. Right. Don't walk around without permission. Don't speak out without raising your hand. Don't throw things at another student. Whatever it might be. They always have these don't do or can't do kind of mentality, and that can be really really frustrating for some kids who feel like they're being that don't do format or can't do, that feels really restrictive, and that can really be frustrating for some kids who may have a lot of rules in place on them at home or have a lot of pressures. That don't do format can really be a trigger. All right. So one of the first things we want to do is really let's adjust our rules and our expectations and really put a can do format on it. Right. Um, instead of saying something like no speaking without raising your hand first or without being called upon, I can change it around and say request permission. What you can do is you can request permission before raising your hand. Great, to share your thoughts, because we want to hear your thoughts. So do that, right? You can definitely demonstrate the chance procedures, right? Instead of follow all rules, right, or don't break the rules, something like that. You can say demonstrate those chance procedures, right? Put a more positive spin on it, right? One of the ones I always have is you can't throw anything for any reason. Sometimes people want to pass something to another student and they'll just toss it across the room. I don't allow that. They want to use the basketball or they want to use the trash can as a basketball hoop. I don't allow that, right? Because that could be, if that paper hits somebody by accident, that could really set off a kid who might be having a bad day. But instead of don't do format, put a can do. You can definitely hand someone something, or you can place something in the trash can. You can definitely do that. That's cool. Um, Instead of I could put you can come to class prepared and ready to learn, right? Instead of something like you must show up with all your materials, you can do that. You can come to class, right? You can do that prepared, ready to learn. You'd be great, right? Instead of no cursing or no profanity, you can say speak considerately, right? Because kids need to know what that means and they need to know how to do that, all right? You can definitely say something like demonstrate respect towards instructors, peers, and learning environment, right? Instead of, don't damage this or don't mark on desk, whatever. Put a positive spin on it. All right. So you want to put so one of the things you can really do is put a positive spin on your classroom rules. And the other big thing here is the the tiered outcomes. All right, is what I like to call it. And so with this, next to my rules, a lot of classrooms I see just have the rules chart. Do this, don't do this, whatever, right? But the consequences aren't real clear. It's like what's going to happen if I don't do that, right? And maybe for Johnny, Johnny throws paper in the trash can, from across the room, uses a basketball hoop. Johnny, don't do that. Don't take a dojo point off, or whatever it might be, or you get a point off, right? But Sammy does it, and he's done it for like the fourth time. Sammy, you got a referral, and Sammy's like, "What? He did it. Why can't I do it? No, why is he getting points off? Why am I getting a referral?" Right? So there's that perception of expectation of being treated unfairly there. So having a tiered system of outcomes, again, not of consequences, because again, consequences has a negative connotation. Outcomes could be positive or negative. And we want to focus on if you follow the champs model, and if you do the can do, your outcome is going to be you're going to earn some positive points, whether it's in class dojo or whatever behavior management system you're using. If you don't follow that expectation, here's the choice you're making. You're making the choice of not meeting the expectation, and as a result, this is the outcome that you've chosen, right? And it takes away that negative connotation, that negative perception a little bit. All right. So you can see here, for my example here that I use in my classroom, the first consequence is usually a loss of class dojo points, and then I repeat the expectation. Hey, Johnny, you threw that piece of paper as in the trash can like a basketball hoop, right? And so our number three can do? Right, it says you got to hand someone or place in the trash can, right? And this was the first time, so what's that consequence? Okay, Johnny, you made that choice, so let's make a better choice for next time. So we have a more positive, so we have a class dojo point back outcome, something like that, or repeat. Hey, if it happens again, I know it can be fun to kind of shoot that basketball goal. If it happens again, though, remember another class dojo point, then I'm going to call your parent, all right? Because this could escalate to some kind of danger situation if you throw something that could hurt somebody, right? So you want to make sure that you've got a clear tiered outcome so the student knows what to expect, right? Oh man, I slipped up and I missed this expectation. I fell short. If I do it, I lost my dojo point. If I meet the expectation, I can get that dojo point back. But if I do it again, I know what's going to happen. And so students really get some self awareness, and they have the ability to really make decision making skills, make their own decisions about their behavior, and that can really put some ownership back on them. Hey, Sammy, this was the third time that I've had to remind you about speaking considerately. You're using those profanity words, and that can be really off putting. And so, what's that consequence now for the third time? Right? That class dojo, and I got parent contact. We got to do a detention. All right. Let's make sure we really work on that. I know you can kind of that may be part of the words you use when you're around your friends, but we're in a different environment. The classroom culture. We don't use those words. When you go to a job, you're not going to use those words. So let's make sure that we're setting that up for success. So. Let's make sure we don't have a fourth consequence, right? And usually with my fourth consequences, if they end up going through all the consequences on my tiered outcome, usually the last one's going to be a referral to the office, and I make that known. Some of them, the third one is the referral, depending on the severity. All right, but for most of them, if they go through all three of them, it's pretty severe, and it needs to be addressed in another way. So it goes to a referral at that point for some. But they've got the expectation. They know what's coming. If they continue to fall short of the behavior expectation, they know the outcome of that. So really giving them the opportunity to know what's coming and to know how to make the choice of doing something different can be a benefit. All right. And so having those tiered outcomes for falling short of those expectations can be a great strategy. All right. And again, too, we want to make sure they know what are the positive outcomes of my behavior if I meet those expectations, right? And so here we have some examples of some positive outcomes that I use in my Class Dojo. Class Dojo is great because it's super customizable. It timestamps everything that you put in there. You can make notes on it. You can customize your behaviors for anything you need. And you can connect parents so that the parents are notified in real time. So, if Johnny's doing great, parents can see that on their Class Dojo. If Johnny's struggling with some behavior issues, parents can see that and can support you in the classroom with that. All right. So for me, I like to have a lot of schools have like end of the quarter incentives for like perfect attendance or like honor roll or whatever, and those are great. But some students struggle with that long-term gratification. All right. They really want to be a part of that, but that they struggle to maintain the focus on that outcome uh, over the full quarter, and end up falling short. And when they mess up once, then they no longer have an incentive for maintaining their behavior. So if little Susie comes in, and one of the things is um, at the end of the quarter you can attend the pizza party if you have uh, straight A, or A's and B's all on all your assignments, right? But Susie gets an F on her assignment, or a D or a C or whatever. Now that incentive for that pizza party is gone, and now, so what's her incentive for keeping our grades up, right? And so having classroom-based incentives can be a really big help for oh, I messed up once, but I can do this to get that back, or to recover, or whatever. And so I've got several throughout my classroom, but the big ones that kids often like, and again, give your kids some buy-in. Guys, what are here's the thing incentives that I have for you. If you think of anything other that might be good, let me know. I'll be glad to consider it and put it on the list for you. Give the kids some buy-in to some incentives they can earn, right? And I do things, everything from like participation, for reading out loud, for having your book if we're reading it in class, having your homework, if you put your cell phone in the cell phone chart, helping out a classmate, whatever it is, right? I have incentives for all kinds of stuff, because I really want to give kids a lot of incentives for doing the right thing, right? And so some of my classroom-based incentives, things like I tell them I don't take late work at all. That if you miss a deadline, it's a zero. So one of the incentives I offer is that if you have 10 class dojo points, you can cash them in to get that late assignment graded. So I call it a 1 day extension, but usually I say, finish your assignment, and when you're ready to turn it in, let me know it's done, turn it in, and let me know you're going to cash in your points, and I'll cash them in. You can get it graded. All right. And that's a big help for kids. Kids are like, oh, deadline zero. But if you say 10 dojo points, and even if they don't have 10 at that moment, they will work to get those 10 so they can get that assignment in. Because they know, I did it. And I need to get these points to get it in, and they'll do it. And it increases their engagement, and that's really beneficial. All right. Things like notes on an assessment, right? I tell my kids, 20 points. You can use any note, open binder on your quiz, right? Whatever it is, you can use it as long as you have it on paper. You can do it. Of course, in the time of COVID and virtual learning, anything that you have in your notes, you can use on your test. All right, if they earn those points, all right. Um, 25 points I use for I'll drop 5% or 5 questions from a assessment, or whatever it might be, depending on what it is. But kids will do that because, again, they see if I participate and I earn these points, then I can boost my grade overall. All right, so you're not just inflating the grade with these participation points. You're giving them a chance to earn participation points that can then be used to give a little bit of a bump to their grade, or to improve an assignment. Right. 50 points, I make that big. They can drop an assignment. And then any unused points, at a rate of 5 to 1, they can add those points directly onto the homework category of their grade, which is a 10% for us here at JMCSS, up to an A. All right. If they already have an A, then I give them the option of rolling over the points to the next quarter. All right. And so having those classroom-based incentives is great, especially if I'm, with these virtual classes we're doing, if I have, crickets on the other side of the virtual classroom, I remind them, oh, guys, remember, every time you participate, you're earning class dojo points to help boost your grade. And immediately, like, hands on the virtual classroom go up, or people you turn on their mic, say, oh, yeah, here you go. And so it's a really great way to offer some easy incentives, right? All these things are free, and things that we'd probably do for our kids anyway. 5 forgiven, that's a curve right there. Notes on a test, a late extension. Those are things that we already do in the classroom anyway, for accommodations for our students. We're just making it seem like we're just making them earn it a little bit more, and that's giving them some buy-in, and really creating a kind of a classroom economy system, which is a great life skill too. All right. So classroom-based incentives are fantastic. They're immediate gratification. They really help with improving kids' motivation. And even if they make mistakes and fall short sometimes, it gives them something to kind of recover and still work for. It gives them a pathway to success, even though they might mess up a few times. All right. In conjunction with that, they can also build up those points and use those points for those end of the quarter school-based incentives. So whether it's a pizza party, or a ice cream social, or they get to skip the line at lunch, or whatever it is, they could those Class Dojo points could be accumulated and cashed in for school-based incentives at the end of the quarter, or at a school level versus just a classroom level. So having even some clear expectations and school-wide incentives program really does help motivate kids in a positive way. All right. All right, so again, the things we've covered about, again, these are all things that you could do starting tomorrow in your classroom. You could definitely revise your rules chart to be a can do and have some tiered consequences. That's easy. You probably already have some of those things in mind already. All right, you could eat Class Dojo takes minutes to set up. Just copy and paste your roster in, and you're ready to go. Customize your behaviors, ready to go. And easy to do. You could do that in less than 10 minutes for all of your classes and be ready to go tomorrow. All right. The champs model, you can either make your own, or there's a bunch of pre-made ones that you can find online for free. Print them off, ready to go tomorrow. And all of these things, especially in conjunction, can really help change the nature of the classroom environment. All right. Champs sets clear expectations, all right, for what's expected of kids. They know exactly how to operate in your classroom. The tiered outcomes for the can-do uh, list of expectations, formerly known as rules, uh, really helps kids put ownership on their behavior, and takes away the perceived unfair bias, because they can clearly see that everybody's being held to the same standard. Here's what you can do, and if you fall short, here's what's going to happen, no matter who you are. So it really helps eliminate that perception. All right, and then again, Class Dojo provides some immediate gratification that kids can receive for turning around their behavior. All right, and that's a big motivator for them. All right, so what I want you to do right now is we're going to take to kind of wrap up here as our wrap up for this PD. All right. Expectations and outcomes work best when there are some normatives across all classrooms, right? I know I use Class Dojo at the high school level. I have for years. It's typically used at the elementary school level. That's what it was designed for. But I've used it at the high school level for years, and all my students always say, "This is great. I love how you do this. I wish all my teachers did this. Why don't more high school teachers do this?" And so there is, even this year when I've put this in play with our students, I've had students who are like, "Why don't all my teachers do this? I would do so much better if this was in all my classes." Right, because they want to have something to work for. They want to be able to earn those points. They want to be able to show that they are committed to your classroom environment, and be rewarded for that. All right. So first off, I want you to think about. We're going to find, instead of just a partner this time, we're going to find 3 other colleagues, and I want you to discuss what are some common expectations for an engaged and equitable learning environment. All right, you saw, check your slides handout today. All right, that I gave you a copy of. You can see some of my examples in there. You can see some of the incentives and some of that. But I want you to discuss with you and 3 colleagues, discuss some common expectations for an engaged and equitable learning environment. That, if we all got on Class Dojo today, what would be some common behaviors we'd want to put in? If we all created champs today, what are some common champs posters that we'd have in our room? If we all did a can-do rules chart, what would be some common can-dos we'd have, and some common consequences, right? So we're going to come up with some common things that we could all maybe incorporate into our champs, our Class Dojo, and our can-dos to have some consistency across all classrooms. Because if we have some consistency and some normatives across all the classrooms, then kids are really gonna quickly pick up on, here's the expectation, not just in Mr. Gennaro's classroom, not just in Mrs. Arnold's classroom, not just Mrs. Powell's classroom, but in every classroom. Here's the expectation, so I know how to operate going in, and so I can adjust myself to make sure I'm going to be successful in all my classes. Because if I just do this one thing for all of them, I'll be good. All right, so I'm going to discuss this. I want you guys to write these down, and that'll be part of our exit today, and we're going to review those and talk about those at our next PD. All right, guys, I thank you for joining us for our PD today. If you have any questions, you can also put that on your exit ticket, or message me on Microsoft Teams, or email me, and I'll be glad to look at your questions, and we can discuss those at our next PD. All right. Thank you guys, and I hope it's been really helpful for you. I look forward to your feedback. I'll put out a link to the feedback form. Let me know how you thought this PD was for you, if it was beneficial to you, and then we'll look at our next PD coming up in a couple weeks. All right, thanks, guys. Have a great day.